Meet Kari Lia, a filmmaker who's interviewed legends like Rafael Nadal and Stevie Wonder. Kari was the showrunner for Netflix's hit series Breakpoint and has worked on acclaimed projects like BBC Two's DNA Family Secrets and the award-winning Day Zero. Originally from California, Kari began her career as a teen reporter and is now a leading voice in the industry. So, Kari, you have quite of a background in the filming industry. And I think, like, I just have to say a title and then everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah. So, because I watched it and it was up there, like, Breakpoint. You know, I think that kind of settled a tone of what's going on behind the scenes for these athletes in the tennis world and this new generation, right? Because, like, I feel like with Federer, with Roger Federer, it ended, and like this new way of seeing the game, because the attitude is different. You know, you wanted to frame that before going into all that. Like, what was your call for filmmaking? As a producer, as a director, like you have a multifaceted background, which I would actually let you describe it on your own words. Though I have a very impressive introduction prepared for you at the beginning of this podcast. What would you describe the path for what at first looks a very impressive background and very like good results for the hard work to get there?
Like, how did I get there?
Wow,
Um,
yeah.
a lot of failure, I would say. I got there with a like unbelievable amount of hard work and a lot of failure, which I'm sure like, people don't want to hear. They always want to hear like there was some magic secret trick. And I don't even feel personally like I'm there because you're always like I always want to do more and I want to be challenged more. And so like I certainly don't feel like I'm there at all. But learning from my mistakes, I suppose, and working really hard. Those two things.
It's interesting you're saying this because it's very hard. I think like it's more of a retirement act when you're ready to write down your bio, where you're so conscious about how much you achieved. But while you're in the game, you don't want to stop and even think of it because you're still in it. But from outside, I gotta say, if this is just the beginning, holy moly, the things you still have ahead of you. Why filmmaking?
Um, it's a good question. My dad was an amateur photographer, and I really looked up to him when I was young, and he tried in an amateur sort of way to document and tell stories, but he really struggled with it and that he never got very far. But he would always talk to me about how to do it and how to tell people stories, and so maybe I was interested in it because of that. But also, I think I always had things I wanted to say, but I'm not very good like saying things right on the spot, you know? Like if someone asked you, what's your political preference or what do you believe? And I find it really difficult to suddenly, but if you craft a film and you say something with pictures and music and use other people's stories and other people that are much more eloquent than I am, to craft something that says something that rings true with you as a person and you in a human way, then that like I love telling stories. I think um so that's true. Also, I had my parents come from two very, very different backgrounds. My mother was kind of Chicana, Mexican, Native American, and my dad
Oh,
is Jewish.
beautiful.
And I think when you have two very, very different backgrounds, you constantly have to think about things from another person's perspective because you don't come from one perspective. So it kind of maybe it comes a little bit naturally to always think, well, how does the other person feel? Because you never fit into one place, if that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. I think that's the ultimate level of empathy to be a healthy observer of the world because the upbringing was ri- rich. I'll call it rich, not conflicted, because it's different.
Yeah.
I like what you say, Carrie, on being a filmmaker because it feels like you are taking everything that is out there to frame something you want to say. Because today, I think every single, like, this generation is suffering from the speed of it. Like, I get a message and everybody expects me to write back right away. But if I would have been living like the, like 18th century, like I would have taken a piece of paper and I was like start like writing my thoughts and a beautiful letter will come out of it. And it's like, how much are we on a very how and this will maybe navigate into this crisis of people about their identities and feeling so isolated from the world. Maybe it's like everything, it pushes you to be forced to know who you are right away without having the time to take and articulate it, right? And express it as people used to do it through a letter, and you beautifully can do it through a film. So our audience are people that are striving for like I would say a creative path where they are seen, because attention is it's a tough thing today. And I think there's like this conflict in between, do I have to corrupt the message because I have something really unique but it does not fit in the streaming platforms, versus do I like uh, freely adapt myself to what the industry wants and deliver it. How do you think, and without like getting personal on your career, how do you think like these creators should tackle this type of thinking about serving an audience that they don't know necessarily what they want? They want to be entertained. Maybe they want to be exposed to new realities that they don't know. Versus like, speaking up through this medium of creation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great challenge, and that's the challenge I really love. And I think um, filmmakers can find that really frustrating because you don't want to have to make something popular, but actually, I really enjoy making things that are popular and for an audience. I think about my family and my sister. She used to be a school teacher, and she's a smart person. She's a thinking person, but she comes home from work. She's been on her feet. She's been dealing with little kids all day, and she wants to sit down. And she wants to be entertained. But if she learns something while she's there, then great, she'll love it. But I think it's about having a little bit of humility as a filmmaker. Like, you are there for the audience. If you really want to get your message across, everything you do is about the audience. It's not about you, you know? It's about need to know what your message is. But ultimately, it's always thinking like, what do they want to see? How can we get them to think and engage? And through that, you can get your point across. But you have to entertain them first. Otherwise, people can turn the channel so quickly now. It's so easy, right? And it feels like there's so much available. So I really like this challenge, but I understand how frustrating it is for a lot of filmmakers. It is really tough, but just have to remember it's not about you, it's about the audience.
I'm not gonna make you a personal question, which uh, if you don't feel answering, don't. Like, Breakpoint is like a huge success, Netflix streamed, touches like a good point about like the athletic culture transition. I loved it personally, like how it was articulated, and understanding this new generation of athletes that's coming on, that they're exposed with social media and other things. Sometimes it feels like they need to be good athletes as much as like good people for the eye of the public with the social media rise. Um, that said, you said, well, how did I make it all the way up? A lot of suffer. What is that work that you're so proud of, but yet hasn't like really touched the light because it wasn't really accepted through the streaming platforms, or like not bought, or like not distributed? And you would have loved to get like an audience for it, if there is any. That's why I said it's personal.
Yeah. Um, I mean, the first couple series I made when I was first starting to direct, I loved them, and I still love them to this day. And they were made for something called BBC Four here in the UK, which, I think they got 100,000 viewers. Maybe one got 200,000 viewers, which is nothing. I mean, that's really bad. I mean, no, it's not bad. It's normal for BBC Four, but it's not a lot of people. And I made another film called Can Eating Insects Save the World, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a joy to make.
You
But
did?
Yeah.
I believe they can. I actually am a big believer that they can. Be- yeah, at some point I had this idea about like insect roll bars because the high protein in the insect and there's so many,
Yeah.
and because climate change they're multiplying, so maybe like it's a
Yeah.
circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what the film was about. And I love that, but no one watched it. And but that's okay. It's a good place to learn. So, it's all right.
So
I
for
love those
me,
films.
Carrie, is like one of the things I'm struggling, and this is like the genesis of the reason of the podcast is there is like a sensationalism out there, right, about content, but there is like a
Mhm.
lot of quality content that with the tools today would have reached a much wider audience.
Mhm.
Yet, because it was made in a certain time with certain limitations for like what the internet had to offer back then beyond YouTube, couldn't not like get much of a wider audience. Like one study, like a late study that came up late, it was talking about people who are consuming YouTube videos. They're used to a certain like limit time, like something that goes beyond 20 minutes. It will reduce like the interest audience to 10%. So that's why like it's not necessarily the tool. But I was thinking like in an ideal world, what do you think like it's that type of content like you mentioned too, the series and the documentary, that with the right tools would have reached the right audience and would have been a success, right?
I mean, I think there's so much competition for people, for viewers, and there are a lot with the streamers. They're all competing to get as many viewers as they can. So they have a lot of money, so they can offer things that look very enticing, things with celebrities that, people will know. I think in terms of what I work on, by the time they come to me, they've already been commissioned, so it's already been decided. It's not really my job to market them. It's really just to make them. So by the time it comes to me, it's already decided that it will be on Netflix and it will be like Breakpoint 10 1 hour episodes. So, my job is just to make it for that platform. And I think people who come to Netflix and want to watch a documentary, they're kind of signed up for that. So it's not really uh, I just hope to make it as popular as possible.
How is it working with something like comes to you as a script and then it's like you got to make this something for people's eyes? How is that lifestyle? How is the day to day like on everything you've built so far that like ended up being quite of a success? What's the
Um,
routine as a mother, as a female producer? Like that's it is a lot of impressive work behind your background.
well, I work at somewhere called Passion Pictures, and there's a development team, and usually, this team takes an incredible amount of time to develop ideas, and they're absolutely brilliant at it. So by the time it comes to me, it's already been developed into something, and then, you look at it and you think, well, can you make something interesting about this? But really, the key to my job as an executive producer now is just having a brilliant team on board. So it's all about collaborating and getting teams that like to collaborate with each other. So a fantastic producer, a fantastic director, production manager, assistant producer, like editor, cinematographer. So like getting the absolute amazing team on board, and then kind of figuring out what is the thing about this idea that really speaks to everyone. Why do we want to make it? What's exciting about it? And talking about that. And so for me, so much of my job is about collaboration. It's I might have an instinct for what makes something good or what people will want to watch, but ultimately it's about making sure that the team, finding out from the team what we all think about how to do that, you know?
So you're in charge as
Well,
executive producer, right? Of
yeah,
putting
yeah,
people
it's
to
a
healthy
team. Yeah.
collaborate. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But but having this team to healthy collaborate for like a greater outcome.
yeah.
Like recently there's a TV show The Bear that like
Hmm.
slightly defines what's going on behind the kitchen for like high end restaurants.
Hmm.
Like I don't know what's going on behind cameras. Like there's some movies out there, but I don't really know the reality of it.
Hmm.
And Does it get hectic? Does like, people fall in love and fight? Like, is that like that drama that we all know like behind the cameras happen? Like
Well,
how,
it's
because
a
you said collaboration and I'm like, wow, that's one of the like toughest jobs I can think of.
yeah, right. No, it absolutely is. I mean, it really depends on the production. It's Breakpoint was incredibly hard. It's a whole team of 20, 25 of us that are on location for weeks at a time away from our families, working so hard, trying to collaborate each other. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but most of the time we did. So that, is very much on the ground and working hard at that is very, very different than, say, I just executive produced a series about Elizabeth Taylor with Kim Kardashian. That is a series that the team are largely on the ground working on that, and you're more looking at it like, what do the films look like? What kind of questions are we asking? What's the editorial slant? And that's a different kind of drama.
I was thinking, you, um, I mean, I was trying to think because like, as I said before, like for a lot of people that are in the creation, like YouTubers, independent filmmakers, they study like what's going on and like they have like books that tell who does what and all that. How you bring like a beautiful symphony to get the best outcome, because like you gotta make sure like everybody's on their best move for performing the best role.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, there you could get into very technical answer of that question, but ultimately, I think there was a film last year that was really running into trouble, and the team, I came onto it very late, so by the time I came onto it, the team were not getting along at all. And and I kind of sat down with everyone on the team, and at one point, I mean, and this is genuinely how I feel. I just said, "Look, I'm not the boss. Like the boss is the film, and we listen to what the film needs, and we listen to what the film is telling us that we need to do, and that's what we do, and we work for the film. So everyone put their ego away and put it to the side, and we work for the film." And so I think that is genuinely what I believe in. Look, it doesn't always go right. I mean, films are messy. Most of the time you're making films and you're making documentary series, it's never been done before. When we made Breakpoint, it had never been done before. No one had ever had exclusive behind the scenes access to 4 Grand Slams and the most famous tennis players in the world at the same time. And so it's going to be messy. It's going to be hard. We're going to get it wrong. I mean, that is just what making films is. And sometimes I think it frustrates me when people are surprised when things go wrong, because that is just the process of making documentaries. Things just go wrong all the time. And I don't even think of it as going wrong. That's just like the process of making a film. So you have to kind of navigate that and figure out, it's always about finding solutions. My job all the time, I just came from a meeting just now where I was given a list of problems, and you just like, well, we have to finish. So we have to make this, and we have to make it good. So we have to come out with ways to solve problems. And as I tell my kids, they ask me what I do every day, and I say, like, basically every day I start on a no. Like every day I start with impossible. Like people come, my team are saying, this is not and that is possible, and we try to get to possible, and that is what every day is. And it's quite fun because, a lot of times it seems impossible. Like, how are we going to get Carlos Alcaraz to do an interview with us when he said that he won't talk to us? He said he doesn't have time. Might there be a 15-minute window in between somewhere and something? And how can we make that work? And who do we talk to? And, so every day you're starting on impossible, and then you somehow try and make it possible. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't,
I think like everything you're going through, it's like a lesson for any single startup company, tech. Like it's almost like a recipe for things, like applying it for other industries that like
Mm.
deal with that messiness. But it's not something so repetitive, because like you finish this, now you're gonna start another one, and like that cycle repeats. Whereas like, oh, you start a company, you start a startup, and then
Mm.
uh you don't see this much. So like the experience, combining that with like the skill set you develop for this and the way you say like you start a day, I think like can apply to so many entrepreneurs in all areas right now.
We talk here, we say, well, at the end of every production, let's talk about the mistakes that were made to try and make them not happen again. And I kind of feel like, oh, I'm very happy to talk about mistakes that are made, but there is no perfect project. There is no perfect company. You realize that as you get older. When you're young, when you get out of university, you always think, oh, I'm going to work for this perfect company on this perfect show, and it's all going to go brilliantly, and everyone's going to love me, and like that never happens. It never happens. Like, so just give that up, you know. And so once you realize that that never happens, it's not your fault and it's no one's fault. It's just these things are hard. Also, if you want to make something really good, it's really hard. So, you know, if it's easy, then you should be worried because you're maybe it's not going to be quite right. So, um, yeah, I think you have to come to a place of acceptance with that if you want to be sane and not go completely crazy.
I was thinking, because from doing like a film, like sci-fi, or with actors that gotta replicate, versus a
Mm.
documentary, which is like translating the reality into a screen. Which one would you prefer the most?
Well, obviously making documentaries, because that's what I do. I'm completely uninterested in fiction. I'm just really interested in real people and real stories. I have no interest in making anything that isn't real.
And it's interesting because from a family like my parents, when I grew up, like movies weren't a thing, and all we watched, it was like National Geographic or documentaries, and or at max my mom is like, if it's a movie that expresses someone's biography, I'll watch it. Like, we were so picky about it. And I've developed a taste for it too. And I think like it's a very tough job, documentaries, because you gotta like interview people that they're not necessarily into acting, right? So making them interesting for the audience to say the right thing the right way. Like, for example, you're saying it was very hard to get Alcaraz on an interview right during the break point, and because he's busy and all that. Like, aren't you stressed? Like, when he's not busy, he's gonna just make a mess over 15 minutes and not say exactly what you want to get from him. How does that work to get the right thing out there through a documentary?
Well, firstly, Carlos was completely wonderful and said wonderful things in the 15 minutes that we got him. So he's fantastic. There was no worry there. But I mean, that's the job of an interviewer, really, and you learn that over time. I think partially a lot of that is who you choose to interview. You know, if you choose to interview someone, you hopefully you try to interview someone who can tell a good story, but or has an interesting story to tell. You know, if they have an interesting story to tell, then it's going to be a good watch, right? So so that's part of it, is picking who you interview. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things I've learned over the years is how to listen. I think maybe one thing that happens right now with social media is people have forgotten the art of listening, and listening is hugely important to getting people to talk and talk well. And I think if people feel that they're being listened to in a really genuine way, that they will speak in a way that's different, and they will speak in a way that's more meaningful and has more depth. So, you know, I think that's a really important thing that I've learned.
What are like things that you would like to be on upfront on the documenting side that hasn't been yet documented properly?
Something that I would like to do in the future?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I try to, with every series or film that I do, I try to tell a little bit of a story about something that I find personally very interesting. You know, Breakpoint really wasn't about tennis. It was about mental resilience, you know? It was about how to keep going when you feel like it's impossible. It had very little to actually do with tennis. Um, and there were stories in there that were about sexism and racism and bullying and, relationships and relationships with your parents and how that works. And so, there were, yes, it was about tennis, of course, that was the backdrop, but really, that's what you always want to do. And also, like, we just did a series, we've just finished a series about Elizabeth Taylor, and, that was really about a woman breaking through barriers and how difficult that was and the challenges she faced. And, it's a very inspiring story. So, there's always something in there that you care about and you feel like is a personal story. But I don't have a particular story that I'm dying to tell. No.
What do you think in your career has been like a solid understanding and shift, like because you said like it's a collection of failures and suffer. What is at like where are like those points that have determined and like created like a different path for you? Because sometimes we're presenting with these moments and we don't know if it's just like, but looking back, do you ever see yourself as like, oh, if I would have taken this, I would have made that decision, I would have been here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, I sometimes think about, what would things have been like if I stayed in America? Of course, like they would be very different. But ultimately, you like to think that no matter what happened, you'd still be doing something that was creative and making films. So, I'm sure I've made lots of bad decisions in my life, but, you try the best you can and you just live with those decisions and you don't know what it would be like if you chose something else. So it's all right.
I'm gonna ask a silly question. Do you actually, after you finish the production of all, like you have to sit down and watch it, the whole thing again, like
Oh, yeah, of
properly
course.
and
Yeah.
again and again and again? And do you ever feel like, oh, that could have done better? Like it's like a finished artwork, right? Like once it goes live.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I think you try your very best to make it as good as you possibly can, and you don't want it to leave or it's not finished until you've done the best that you possibly can. Um, but yeah, of course, there are things that you look at and you think, oh, I wish we had done it differently. But like I say, every time you do something, you're doing it for the first time. So, sometimes it's really difficult to know. Yeah.
I was thinking the um, creative school, like I watched this YouTube video where a creative school were asking of how is it stressful serving like a very tough audience because attention spam is quite a most expensive thing nowadays, and is what do you think the audience lately is asking the most that you try to embrace that through the filming?
Well, I think they want something that's either inspiring or that they can relate to. Genuinely, generally, yeah, or is intriguing. But most things, they want to know. Yeah, I mean, I work on documentaries, so it's different than YouTube. YouTube is, obviously it's a much shorter attention span. So, but basically, you try and get something. I always say, like the first 10 seconds is so crucial to any show because visually you have to say so much within the first 10 seconds to kind of get people's attention. Um, but you shouldn't be afraid of making something beautiful. That's not a bad word. You want people to feel inspired and to feel excited about what you've made.
Climate documentaries and everything that they're trying to articulate a message, and hardly sometimes like it's you can relate to it. Usually you feel so detached from that reality, but it's trying to make you conscious about it. I was thinking if like all like the ones that are putting so much hard work are using the right frame, as like people are upfront on like how things get consumed. No.
Yeah, I mean, I made a climate change documentary that was called Day Zero, uh, narrated by Chiwetel Ejiofor that ended up winning an award. Yeah, and it's really, really difficult. I think you have to be kind of when it comes to climate change documentaries, you have to be a bit unafraid that you're not necessarily going to be entertaining people. I mean, people, ultimately, you have to kind of try and grab them as much as you can, and but it's very difficult because the truth is that always going to be a bad news story. There's not much happiness in that story, and not everyone wants to watch that. So, but it depends on what your objective is. If it's to educate or be honest, then you have to do that.
awareness is something like sometimes like people are not, we're like, give me a dream, give me like, the motivational side of things, like inspire, right? There are many angles to it. I was thinking if there are any ways to mix inspiration with like documenting and have that outcome from people understanding like the other side. Hey, this is the situation, but it can get better. And
Yeah.
mixing this two, as you say, people relating to it on the solving side of things versus the blaming side because we ended up where we ended up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, with climate change, it's just so difficult because, you know, you try and tell a story that is true and meaningful and shocking and surprising and beautiful to look at. But, you also want people to walk away knowing what it is that they can do to change things. And if there is something that people want to know what they can do. Quite often the solution is very complicated. But there are simple things that people can do. And that's what we try to do with Day Zero ultimately is what's the one thing that people can do to make a difference? And it's very clear. It's quite simple. So.
What keeps you going about the like the most? And I understand like there's a lot of love for like the job, but there must be something else in there, like that's
Uh, Terrible dysfunction, childhood trauma. That's what's in there. No, I'm joking.
oh
I'm joking. No, I genuinely, I love what I do. I love what I do. It's so exciting. I bounce out of bed in the morning. There must be something wrong with me psychologically. I don't know, but I love what I do, and I find it deeply interesting. And I love my teams. I love the people I work with, and I absolutely love it. And I feel so lucky to be able to do this job. And I think it's incredibly exciting. And, you know, um, I think when you're starting out, at any point in this job, it's very competitive, the job. And, there's always someone that's more successful than you are. There's always people that are better, not better because it's really hard to judge that, but there's always going to be people that have more awards or more whatever than you do. So, but I think once you stop worrying about that and you just let that go, it's really the challenge of like, how do I make something that's even better? How do I do something that's more creative or tells a story in a way that reaches more people or is more meaningful or work with great teams? And on last series I did, there was a young director. She's coming up through the ranks and she got her own film and she got to make that, and her film is absolutely brilliant and incredibly empowering, and it just makes me so happy to see that you're bringing people up and you're helping people achieve their best work. And I think that gets me really excited. I love that genuinely.
that's a very well like, and I don't think it's anything wrong with you. I think like there might be something wrong with people that are so less passionate about their opportunities when they're talented and they're not putting it at use at the max, right?
Mm,
Taking it to
yeah.
11, I would say. I was trying to imagine, and maybe you can answer this for us, but who's Carrie 10 years from now?
Old. Very old. Gosh. No, I mean, I just want to keep on doing what I'm doing and keep making these films, and hopefully I don't get kicked out. I mean, the industry is so tough at the moment, it's really changing, and yeah, it's really hard. And I know a lot of people in this industry are struggling right now, and I have a huge amount of sympathy for that because it's tough. So I hope that I'm still making films. Yeah.
You're right on point there, Carrie, because being so close to the reality of it, what's wrong with it? Like, what's happening, and how can it be solved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, if I had the answer to that, that would be amazing. I think the industry is just going through a massive change. It's moving from, normal channels, TV channels to online, and there's a shift, and viewing habits have massively changed. I mean, think about how you probably watched TV when you were growing up. You watched it, a show was on at 9 o'clock, you turn it on at 9 o'clock, right? No one watches TV like that anymore. You watch whatever you want, and you have an option of watching whatever you want whenever you want it. So everything's changed. That there are winners in that and there are losers in that, and that means that massive television isn't going to be made anymore in the same way, because we can choose. And that means that can be good and bad. And unfortunately, for a lot of people right now, it means that they're out of work because not as much TV is being made, you know? So that's a
Yeah.
shame.
But at the same time, like it's taking a reshape because like people are not slowing down on consuming,
No,
right?
no, no, they're not. But you have more options in terms of what you're consuming, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is good for the consumers. But I think it will end up recalibrating. It has to eventually. It will end up recalibrating, but I don't know if it'll ever go back to the way it was, you know?
Yeah, well, let's hope that it's going to only get better. That
Let's
that's
hope
that's
so.
what I yeah, that's what I think of. I think like there's so much yet to unfold in the media industry that everybody's going to have an opportunity in it. It just needs to serve properly every player with like different tools, right? And because entertainment, it's not going to stop. In fact, it like people need to be more entertained. The subjects needs to get more enriched. So that's why I'm slightly, extremely, slightly. I am very motivated about the future, and it's true that it's going through its times, and it will come around. But it is very tough for the people that are suffering the transition, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But all industries go through that. And in TV, you know, I've been in TV for 33 years now. And the thing is that a lot of industries always go through up and down. TV hasn't had as many ups and downs as other industries, and this we're just gonna have to ride this one out.
We must. It's all a struggle,
Exactly.
as you said.
It is. Unfortunately, I wish there was an easier
Yeah.
way.
No,
Yeah.
well, surviving is a struggle. Like our bodies do that to, like reset again and again. So
Mm.
maybe it's just we have to interpret it differently. It's so beautiful having had this conversation with you, Carrie. I mean, you inspire a lot of confidence and a lot of, uh, you know, um, calmness at the same time with all this like very hectic industry. And I gotta say, like, I was reading your biography and like everything you achieved, and it's really impressive, like how you keep humble and open, and like having all these conversations about your career. It's a lot of success and achievement that I want you to breathe it in for a second, just like allow me, like to congratulate you on that note. And I'm
Well,
really
thank
excited
you.
about every single work you have up ahead. I think I'll follow it closely. I'm a fan of documentaries, so I consumed already Breakpoint start to end. So I loved it. I really loved it because you're right. It was not about the sport as much about the people in it in this like new phase. Thank you so much for your time. And
Well, thank you.
is there any single advice you want to share with the creators out there that are going through this phase of trying to put together a film, or like please the audience with their work?
I think the best advice that I would ever give to, particularly to young people that are trying to get into the industry, is like pick up a camera. Like when I was young and I was starting out, cameras were like almost as big as me. They probably weighed the same amount as me. I couldn't actually physically pick up a camera and go and make something. But now, you know, you've got this and it's actually quite good. And you know, I see my kids, they're filming all the time and editing all the time. You can tell stories this way, and it's amazing. You don't need to wait to get a job always. I mean, you need a job to make money, of course, but like if you're young and you're inspired and you want to tell stories, like just pick up a camera and start filming. That would be my advice. Don't wait for someone to tell you what to film or tell you what to do. You can learn so much and go through all the pain and suffering on your own, making your own film. But you know, I think in a way these things democratize filmmaking now, and I wish more people took advantage of that because anyone can film now. Whereas when I was growing up, I had to basically wait for a guy with a camera to come along and film with me, which like, you know, was annoying because it meant I had to wait a long time. But you don't have to do that anymore. You're so lucky. So just go for it. That would be my advice.
Oh, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Wow, like quite of a weight of ending. You're right. Don't take for granted that we have all these like easy ways of articulating things like are so unique for one. Wow. Kari, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.